All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Daniel Estrin. We're at Cristom Vineyards. It's November 5th, 2020. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
First question for you, why wine?
The question everybody wants to know. Why would you want to get tied up in this business where you make fancy booze for people? It was kind of an accidental path for me. Accidental for myself, but I feel it was purposeful by other people in my life. I come from a family who doesn't drink, and it's not really part of my culture at all, but I had one uncle that was very much into wine and just fine things in general. His name was Mark Estrin, and while a child, he was more or less peripheral in my life, living far away. But as I grew older and really explored my troubled youth stage of life, he took note of me, and I think there was a recognition of some similarities between he and I. And I had graduated high school, and I was at the ripe age of 19, and after floundering around for a bit, I took off on a road trip down to Mexico is what I was aiming for. Loaded up my 90 VW Fox and headed south with a surfboard, a bunch of bike stuff, skateboard, that sort of thing. All those things that interested me, as school didn't at that time. So at 19, no school, I just wanted to explore life. And so headed towards Mexico and had some good times along the way, and got down to LA, and lo and behold, my 90 VW Fox decided not to go any further. Fortunately, my sister Molly was living in the area at the time, and had some other family, Mark included. And ended up sleeping on my sister's couch, much to the chagrin of her roommates, for about a month or so. And my Uncle Mark took note of me, and we started hanging out. And he got me a job at a wine store called the Wine House, and that's in West LA. And at 19, I certainly couldn't be selling wine or tasting wine, but I was stocking shelves. And on the sly, my uncle was, pouring me a little wine, a little scotch, and teaching me and exposing me, I guess, more than anything else, to the nuances of those sort of things. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but he was taking an interest in me. And after a few years of, after about 8 months living in LA, working at that wine shop, I wanted to go back to having fun. So I packed things up, and I took off on a climbing trip down through Southern California and Mexico. And he asked me in the fall of the next year to come back and do harvest for him. So he and a friend of his had started a small wine label called Red Car, and they were making their wine in a place called CCWS, Central Coast Wine Services, and it's a place where there was the Miller family owns the production facility, and they allow some alternate proprietors to make wine there as well. And I was like, well, making wine, that seems like fun. I just want to have fun. So that's where I went. And so I went into this world of a bunch of small different winemakers making wine together. And I was just the whipping boy, right? Mark and his partner, Carol Kemp, had a winemaker, Tim Spear, and I just pretty much stomped grapes for 8 hours a day. That was his MO. He was very much hands-off, very non-interventionalist, as every winemaker says they are, but he was very true to that. And I more or less stomped grapes for 8 hours a day, moved things around with a forklift, and that was my first exposure to wine. But peripheral to what Red Car was doing, I met a lot of other people doing really cool stuff. And there were some young people there who like to party and have a good time, and that I was totally into that, and it really captured my attention. You know, I was like, this is something that could be fun, and took off for the off season, and got the call to come back, and came back the next year, and this time, new winemaker. Chris King was there. I think he was titled Assistant Winemaker at the time, or production winemaker. But Chris was the one who really opened up my eyes to what the wine industry could be. Chris is a salty the earth farmer kind of guy, and he and his wife Deanna really helped cultivate my interest in wine, and taught me a lot about production, and exposed me to different people and different wines, and I was really fortunate to meet some really nice people that catapulted me into my next chapter. So at the end of that harvest, with my second harvest with Red Car, my uncle noticed that I wasn't really focusing and buckling down and committing to things, and he told me that if I didn't change things up, I wouldn't be welcome back, or he wanted to push me out of the nest, is what I really felt, and that's what he did. So Matt Dees, the winemaker for Honada, they had not yet gotten their own winemaking space. They were making wine there. Asked me if I wanted to go to New Zealand, and I said, heck yeah. This is what I want to do. This travel, make wine, and party, have fun. That sounds great. And I got a job with Craggy Range, and took off to Craggy Range, and sitting on the plane to go to New Zealand to make wine on the other side of the world for a kid that barely graduated high school, who didn't have any direction. This was really special to me, and it gave me a sense of self-worth and value and purpose that I'd never had in my life before. It was great. Went to New Zealand, made wine, met a bunch of new people. Met a winemaker named Larry Cherubino. He was the one who got me my next job in the next year. But towards the end of that harvest at Craggy Range, I got the call that my Uncle Mark was succumbing to his battle with cancer. So I came back a little early. I was fortunate to be able to spend some more time with him, help take care of him in his last days, and thank him for exposing me to this wine world. Took off to the mountains, had some time to recoup, spent some time with them, very good friends of mine in Bend, Oregon, snowboard bum, climbing, just having a good time again. And that next year, I got a job through Larry to go work for Mount Lingigiron in Northeast Victoria. So we're talking circa 2006 at this point. I'm just now getting old enough to drink alcohol and get into really appreciating it, and go to Australia and get to make some really cool climate Syrah. Once again, flooded with new people who exposed me to different aspects of wine. Get to once again get that feeling of purpose, going somewhere on the other side of the world and being put to work, and had a wonderful time there. Going to New Zealand and then Australia, and understanding how the industries down there really value the education side of it, opened up the possibility for me to go back to school. And that part of my mind had never really been interested in going to school before. So 22, 23-ish, right around in there, I made the decision to come back to the Central Coast, where Central Coast Wine Services was, moved to San Luis Obispo, and started going to community college, because, as I mentioned, I barely graduated high school. I think it was like 2.0 GPA, maybe. I started going to school. I started knocking out those prereqs. And now, at this point, I had worked a few harvests. I had a direction. I knew what I wanted to do. And at this point, I felt that I wanted to check the box of going to college in my life. Mm-hmm. And so it took a long time to put the pieces in place in order to get into university, but eventually I was able to transfer to Cal Poly. So it was 3 years at Cuesta Community College, and then got into Cal Poly and got to study there. It was this period of time going to school. It wasn't just, I mean, there was a lot of having fun, I'm not going to lie, but I got to use my production experience and exposure to wine to help pay for going to school. So I was fortunate that I got jobs in restaurants, got to manage wine lists, got to taste with distributors, expose my palate to wines of the world that I've never known before, and got to understand another side of the business that I wasn't familiar with. So I'm sorry, I digress. The question was initially like, why did I get into wine? But it all funnels down as to it was my uncle that first exposed me to it. Wonderful people that helped me along the way, and then a sense of purpose and a sense of self-esteem, which I'd never had before. So. I guess I could continue along that story if you want.
Continue along. I'll come back and ask questions later. Continue on.
I apologize. As I said before we started talking, you know, winemakers, they love to talk about themselves, and as much as I try to deny it, I guess I am a winemaker. So yeah, school, working in restaurants, learning about wine, exploration into the wine world got me interested in farming, and my experience with winemakers previously also got me interested in farming. I had worked for now, you know, a number of different winemakers, and I was a little turned off by the whole production side of things. Or at least the winemaking side of things, and I decided that I wanted to go the route of farming. So when I got into Cal Poly, you either have to do the enology side or the viticulture side, unlike Davis. So I chose viticulture. I was like, this winemaking side, I've got a feel for it, but I want to go down a path and really explore new things for myself. So. Studied viticulture, great professors. I was fortunate to have the school being in a wine region as well, so I got to continue visiting with winemakers and got to scratch the itch of curiosity. So I'd go to work and be in the restaurant. I'd hear about different winemaking practices or farming practices, and then I'd be able to take those questions to I could seek out people in the region that I could ask questions about. So I got my interest tipped into soils and biodynamics. So going from classes to asking winemakers to going to do work and tasting these wines, it all really cycled in and upon itself. Really fed my curiosity. So it was during that time I actually met Andrew Rikers, another good friend, and he and another friend, Jared McClintock, moved in across the street from me, and we'd start tasting wines and drink wines all the time, and it was a great time for me to expand my wine world. So going back to school, I really gravitated to soils, and I ended up minoring in soils. And I took the soil side of it and bonded that to the curiosity in biodynamics, and ended up doing my senior project on quantitative analysis of nutrients and elements in soils from the L'Aventure vineyard in Paso Robles. They were doing a conversion from biodynamic to organic, and that was my first indoctrination to the biodynamic ideas. That seed was planted, but it had yet to be watered and fertilized and cultivated. So it was something that was going to lie dormant for a little while, but would certainly come back. My senior year at Cal Poly, I did vintage while going to school. Was able to swing that somehow. So I was living in San Luis Obispo, but working in the Santa Rita Hills for Sashi Mormon and his conglomerate of projects down there. So repeatedly, I've just been very fortunate to come in contact with connected individuals and people who have taken an interest in me. For what reason, I don't know, but I don't really care. I feel really fortunate that I have. So I got to meet Sashi and work with him. Sashi tied into Raj Par, working alongside him on his project, Sondi, and the Domaine de la Côte vineyard. I worked with Chris King once again, so I worked with him at Redcar, and he had planted the Domaine de la Côte vineyard down in the Santa Rita Hills, and so I worked the growing season with Chris, and then from the growing season I went into the winery and started working with Sashi and Raj in the winery. So it was great. It was a perfect transition. I wasn't exactly looking to do the winery work, but they knew that Chris was able to vouch for my my skills on a forklift, and I was competent and apparently not lazy. So I came into the winery and worked there too. So got to see the fruit that I worked with in the vineyard go into the winery, and it was a great way to spend my senior year doing that, and then finishing it up at school, and really tying a bunch of things together. And talking with Raj at lunches and asking him, where do I go next? What do I do next? Obviously, he's a very well-connected individual. He was able to put me in touch with some people in the Southern Hemisphere. And so, I went to work for Piero Incisa della Roqueta at Bodega Chave down in Argentina. So, just windfall to windfall is pretty much has been my wine career. And so I'd go down to Bodega Chave. My friend and I, Anthony Avila, we go down there together. He works for Bodega Noemia. I work for Bodega Chave, but we're in the middle of nowhere. We're not living together. I'm living with an Italian that speaks English, and I was working for a bunch of Argentinians. My Spanish was kind of crap. I had spent a month in Ecuador prior to going to Bodega Chave to work on my Spanish, but it really didn't solidify things until I got down to Argentina. So it was quite the experience. My toughest harvest to date, for sure, but I was able to be exposed to more biodynamics, working with their farmer there, their vineyard manager there, work with some very old Pinot vines, and make some really cool wines down there. It was quite exciting. And I apologize, I've got chronologically I missed a vintage there. let's back up a step. So 2011 was working with Sashi. After that, I was talking to Raj. He had actually put me in touch with Jean-Louis Chave, and I was supposed to go down to, or go over to Hermitage and work over there, but lo and behold, things didn't pan out. And come the spring of 2012, was probably the biggest break I've ever gotten in my life. I was talking to a friend, Trey Fletcher, who is at that time the winemaker for Bien Nacido. And he and I had become acquainted by a restaurant that I worked in. We both worked in wineries, and I could talk production with him, and I'd pour him wines, and we just became fast friends. And he put me in touch with the assistant winemaker at Littorai Wines in Sonoma. So rather than going to Hermitage, which would have been a great experience in and of itself, I ended up going to Littorai in the fall of 2012. And at that point, I knew of Littorai, but I wasn't yet really. I didn't really understand what I was getting into, but going from the Sonoma coast and then going up to Sonoma was, it felt really cool. I remember very distinctly driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, and I was like, man, this is great. I feel like I'm really getting somewhere in my career. I'm going from, the Central Coast, which is great and all, but I'm going to Sonoma, like the epicenter of great Pinot Noir in the United States. And I was really excited for that opportunity. And I got there and I was just blown away. I had never worked anywhere that paid so much attention to all the details. I'd never worked somewhere that was so focused on the farming and what was going on in the vines, and I was completely taken with it. I worked my ass off and had a great vintage, got the full exposure of the Littorai program, being able to sample vineyards, dry fruit, work in the winery, make compost. It was a really wonderful experience. And now we're caught up. I apologize. Now we're to Bodega Chave. And Bodega Chave, myself and Anthony Avila go down there, have really hard harvests because of the isolation. The vines down there are irrigated via flood irrigation, so they have a bunch of canals, and so you have a lot of stagnant water in canals much of the year, and a lot of mosquitoes. I remember going in to do the night shift at the bodega, and just the walls looked like they were moving because there were so many mosquitoes on the wall, like having to put DEET on in order to go to work. It was wild. But there was also some silver lining to that as well. Sitting down with Piero and having some wonderful dinners, tasting some great wines. Piero is the grandson of the founder of Sassicaia, and being able to taste some of those wines was from his library was incredible. It's some really powerful experiences happened there for sure. And then, of course, Argentina is a beautiful place, and got to enjoy the outdoors, did some fly fishing, went to Chile, a bunch of surfing, best ways of my life. But I'm sure you get this a lot, but us winemaker type are very much hedonists. So for me, I get a great pleasure of being outside. So really, Anthony and I had a great trip down south. So towards the end of the trip in Argentina and Chile, I got the call from the assistant winemaker at Littorai once again saying, hey, you did a great job last year. We'd love for you to come back. And I was like, sounds good. Sounds great. I really loved it. I think there's a lot more for me to learn there. I'd love to come back. So I came back, and when I got there, I took note that one of their vineyard crew members, which was kind of a swing between the vineyard and cellar, had left. And I told Ted in a sampling trip that he and I were on that I wanted a full-time job there. I saw the potential for me to really learn a lot and to hitch my cart to this thing that he had going on. And he said, all right, well, let's talk at the end of harvest. Needless to say, I busted my ass and worked really hard, and that's that one conversation with Trey the previous year that got me the first internship there had snowballed into the greatest job opportunity in my life. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Maybe I should take a breath. I'm sorry.
No. This is perfect. This is great.
Yeah.
Not for me to talk. I'm curious about. We'll come back to Littorai in a second, and we'll kind of take it from there. But I'm curious about as you're being introduced to all the different parts of wine. So you have your uncle kind of introducing you to and the wine shop side of things. Then you're introduced to the production side. Then you get the vineyard side. What was the appeal to you? What drew you in and made you want to learn more? Made you want to go back to school? What was the initial appeal of the whole industry?
I have. Earlier in life, I feel like I've grown to cultivate some patience in my life, thankfully. But I've never had a great attention span, as many of us don't. I'm not unique in that. And I was really drawn to the idea that there was so many different facets of what was going on in wine. I could sit down with a book and read on one particular region, and I'd get to a point where this is kind of boring. Let's open up a bottle of something from somewhere else, and then now it's sensory rather than a study sort of thing, and then going from that, and then being like, well, I want to know more about how they do this. So then going and be able to talk to people and. All right, people are getting boring. Let's go look at the plants. Like there's so many different facets. There's the production, the growing, the soils, the people involved there, and it's all tied together to food as well, right? And while wine was never a part of my upbringing, I had a grandmother, which was an organic gardener and a great cook. My grandmother Millie had a huge hand in raising me, and she exposed me to. She was into organics before Organics was hip, and I remember turning her compost as a small child, and I remember eating at her table and eating her brisket, and the food side of it was certainly there for me. The dopamine rush that I got from eating good meals with her is still with me today. And so being able to tie that all together, there's just so much that wine could offer me. Mm-hmm. And to this day, any time that I'm starting to feel like I'm stagnating, turn my head in another direction, there's something else to do. Mm-hmm. So I would say the many facets that there is in the wine world, the people, the plants, everything. Mm-hmm. It's all part of it that draws me in.
Speaking of the plants, I'm curious about that too. That kind of the fork in the road when you get to Cal Poly and you have to choose kind of between your knowledge and viticulture, and you're kind of turned off by production. So I'm curious, A, about what about production at that point had left you a little bit wanting, and B, what about viticulture made you excited to go down that path?
Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of this as well, but in some of the winemakers that I worked underneath, there wasn't a lot of humility to them, and I saw that they were, winemakers often get the credit for making the wine, right? And they get pushed out front and are exalted for these things that they do, right? And being that I had worked internships and worked with all the other soldiers in the trenches, I was like, that's not how it works. Like, I see interviews and them saying this, but actually they're not getting dirty, and they're not sweating, they're not doing all the hard work. And I saw a lot more humility in the growing of the grapes. And so Chris King was a big influence on me on that. He, I mean, most humble guy you'll ever meet in your life, but he is capable of and has proven that he can plant world-class vineyards and farm them really well organically. And you know, he's not on the label. He's not, you know, he's not the exalted one, and that really struck a chord with me. I have so much gratitude for everybody involved in the winemaking process. I'm not just talking like once the grapes have been picked, but you know, the people working in the nurseries, our vineyard crew that does the hard work when it's pissing rain outside or whether it's super hot outside. All of these people come together to make the wine. So that's what drew me towards the viticulture side of things, and the humility involved with it. I came to realize that this glamorized wine world is a relatively new thing, right? Like the winemaking was thought of as a peasant job. You know, you go back 100 years, nobody wanted to take over their parents' vineyard in winery. Nobody wanted to. It's like everybody was running from it because it's just a slog. And I don't ever want to lose touch of every step in the process. And I love getting dirty. I love getting out there and sweating. And I also love the intellectual side of the blending as well. But the growing of the grapes is truly the heart of it and the most enjoyable part of it for me. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get onto this more, but it's not only about the grapes. It's about the farm and the organism that is the farm.
You mentioned that you were not much of a high school student, not too interested there. I'm curious, as it came to going back to school, did you find, once you found something you were passionate about, did you become a better student? Did you enjoy school more at that point?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you care about something, obviously you're going to put in more into it, right? And so working in some of the Southern Hemisphere harvests and working with people who had positions that I wanted to have, I was motivated. And so I knew there was no way I was getting into a university if I had shit grades. So I busted my hump. And I did my very best to get the best grades that I could. So, with the exception of a few like organic chemistry and stuff, I did pretty well and was able to transfer. So at that point, by the time that I transferred into Cal Poly, I was 25. So I was older than all my other classmates. And I was paying for it by myself. I was taking out loans, and I was fortunate to have like my sister be able to kick me in $1,000 here and there when I couldn't make rent or whatever. But largely I was on my own. So if I wasn't committed to classes, I was wasting my time. And so it absolutely made the hugest difference for me.
All right, let's take you back to Littorai now. You've gone from 1 year as an intern, and now you're getting your job offer at the end of the second year. So tell us about that job, the initial job, and kind of your experiences there once you became full-time.
Yeah. So 2013 vintage, bust my hump, work really hard. Ted tells me, all right, dude, you got yourself a full-time job. You're going to work between the vineyard and winery. And we'll give you a title. We'll give you the Cellar Master title. And I'm like, sweet, awesome. And I was over the moon. It was a great opportunity. So we're coming to the end of harvest, getting ready for bottling, doing rackings, cleaning barrels, doing all the trench work in the cellar. We get into the new year, time to start pruning. I'm out there with the vineyard crew, pruning the vines. The vineyard crew at Littorai had as much influence on me as Ted did. Taught me an even better work ethic. Really helped me with my Spanish, and taught me a lot of the small nuances that make the difference in the vineyard. So every year at Littorai, they make the compost pile right after harvest. So we made the compost pile, and then I got to add the compost preps that we made as well after harvest. And so that would be in the winter there. And starting to read more about biodynamics and getting a feel as to what it means and where it all comes from. A growing appreciation of ethereal forces, things that we can't necessarily put our hands on or can't quantify, but coming to appreciate the things that we can't, and acknowledging that there are forces at play. All of that is birthed in that first year at Littorai. As we're pruning, Ted tells me that the assistant winemaker, John, his wife is pregnant and due sometime in March. And so Ted tells me that I have to fly down to New Zealand and act as assistant winemaker at Burn Cottage, because their assistant winemaker and their vineyard manager quit like 2 months before harvest. And so Ted was consulting at Burn Cottage, and so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this. So I got to thank John and his wife for having a child when they did, because that was a huge, huge opportunity for me. So I hop on a plane and fly down to Centro Otago, and I land and meet with Claire, the general manager, winemaker down there, and she's like, yeah, well, the interns have been in the vineyard. The winery hasn't really been, spiffed up and cleaned up yet. She's playing triage, trying to, wear all the hats, and I jump into the fray. And so I train the interns, tell them how we want to do things, and basically I'm taking the blueprint, which I've learned the last 2 years at Littorai, transposing it to what was happening down at Burn Cottage in a whole new world. And within the first year, my first full-time job in the wine industry. So it was great. It was awesome. I had an awesome crew. We had a good harvest. Not too many hurdles were thrown at us. We got a couple picks in, and then Ted comes down and starts putting his Midas touch on the picking calls and such. And somehow I was able to manifest the managerial skills I didn't know I had to help this crew put things together, right? And all the while, I didn't realize that this was an audition all the while for Ted, because he was, whether he knew it or not, he was testing me to see, what I was capable of. Mm-hmm. And so I'm there overlapping with Ted for a little while, and then I fly back, and I just get right back into the trenches at Littorai, back into spreading compost and what have you, working in the cellar and just doing the Cellar Master thing. And I was thrilled. It was great. It was so much fun to go to Central and do that thing, but I was also happy to come back and continue learning from the vineyard crew and from John, the cellar. It was really cool. Ted comes back by May of 2014. I'm finishing up work, and Ted pulls me aside. He's like, "Hey Dan, I'd like to meet with you at the end of the day." I'm like, okay, cool. And so end of the day, Ted and I step into the lab. It's just he and I. He's like, well, John just gave me his notice, and he's going to be leaving within a month. I'm going to put a posting up on Wine Jobs right now, unless you want the job. And it was one of the happiest moments of my life. It was awesome. It was so powerful. I was through the roof, and I remember driving home that night, just blasting music, just could hardly contain myself, like busting out of my skin, because I knew what it meant. It was great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that then. Tell me about the next step for you. Is there added pressure on you now? Do you feel like you have to live up to something? What's the next step after you kind of realize what you're doing now?
Oh, like I felt completely over my head. Completely over my head. I mean, Littorai makes under my opinion, some of the best wines. I'm sorry, some of the best wines in North America, and now I felt responsible for them. You know, Ted's there all through harvest. He's the guiding light, making decisions, but I felt wholly over my head. But I was going to do whatever it took in order to rise to the occasion. So if I thought I worked hard before, I had no idea what was to come. I mean, it was just a lot of work and dedication, long days, and a lot of just teaching myself, figuring things out, and really exploring the capacity of my problem-solving skills. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. Took me a minute to figure out the winemaking side of stuff, but to be honest, that was the easier side of things. All right, I got to keep sulfurs here. I got to, be sampling it. But these times I got to do, make sure supplies are ordered by this time. Like once you figure out the calendar of events, a lot of that falls into place. But what I wasn't prepared for is a lot of the managerial side of it, and also the new challenges that Ted wanted to give me. So up until that point, Littorai had chickens, ducks, and the biodynamic farm was still growing. So that's one thing that Ted always did, is he grew things very slowly because he wanted to do it all right. And now he wanted to take the farm to the next step. So it's about sheep. Time to get sheep. I mean, I grew up in South Salem, in the suburbs, and I knew nothing about this stuff. So I'm like, all right, you want to get some sheep? Yeah, I can do that. Let's do it. So it started out by working with a woman who had a small flock, and we'd run her sheep on the property, and I'd help her move them and stuff. And I'm like, all right, cool. I think I can do this. This doesn't seem that bad. And she put me in touch with a woman up here and right outside of Silverton, and we started our flock. I started a flock with 7 sheep and threw them back of the Littorai Tundra, and we drove back, and there may have been some copulation in the back of that truck, but we get back to Littorai, and lo and behold, we start our flock. Starting with 7, come spring, we have a bunch more, and slowly but surely we started growing the flock. Get about a year into having sheep, and everything's going well. We're figuring it out. No tragedies, no big problems. And Ted's like, all right, this is great. This is real good. And let's get cows. So I'm like, cows, all right, cool. So I do some research, figure out, it's like do a bunch of research, show Ted like what I think we might want, what might work for our purposes, and I did that with the sheep too. But we end up settling on Dexters, and I find a woman who has horned Dexters in Northern California. and start with just a couple of cows. And slowly but surely, we get another cow. I throw them in the back of a trailer, drive them off to get bred. 2 cows, all of a sudden we've got 7. And slowly but surely we grew the animal program. So Ted really put his confidence in me to figure this stuff out. And I grew to understand the saying of, never take a job you feel qualified for. Because the fun was in figuring out all the stuff I didn't know how to do. And while I felt super unqualified when I first took the job, it was just constant pushing by Ted, and my insatiable desire to meet his expectations, just continually pushed myself, the farm, and what we did on the farm. So by the time I left Littorai last year, it was I think 7 cows and 40 some odd sheep, and I think it's a little bit bigger now, but it was awesome. Like throughout those years, also all the winemaking, all the interns, I was able to have some really phenomenal interns, which I in turn had them as full-time employees. Got to do another vintage down at Burn Cottage. One of my interns at Littorai is now the assistant winemaker at Burn Cottage. My successor at Littorai, another one who was started as an intern, he was my cellar master for a few years, and now he's the assistant winemaker. Another one intern is now the cellar master, and we were just so fortunate to have some very talented individuals work with us, and the power of building people really got impressed upon me, and it's one of my favorite parts of the wine industry, and it's something that I had no idea about when I first started down this path, is the impact you can have on other people's lives, and it's been one of the most satisfying parts of this, for sure.
You talked a little bit about the biodynamics part of things, and then you mentioned the kind of early bug, and then coming back and once you're at Littorai. Tell me about what attracted you what was attractive to you about biodynamics, and about the process of learning it and of implementing it along the way.
So at Cal Poly, I learned of biodynamics, and it poo-poo voodoo seemed cool. Don't really know a lot about it, but interested. Coming to Littorai, making compost, like mind-blowing at the concepts behind it, right? So building fertility on the farm and creating a fertility cycle which regenerates itself, right? So using the parts and the waste of the farm to also create the fertility for the farm. Awesome. Making the preps from things that we grow, minimizing the amount of products brought onto the property to sustain the farm, right? Like these things are almost commonsensical to me when you think of it. Commonsensical to anybody when you think about a farm. Like, all right, you want to grow something. Do you want to continually have to buy things and purchase and bring things from off the property to keep it going? Or do you rather cultivate it within your system, right? I mean, that's pretty easy for me. Going from having a conceptual understanding with that first couple of vintages to being able to work year in, year out with the cycles, and see the vitality which it instilled in the land, that was really cool, and really solidified things for me. I have a. It's difficult sometimes to convey what biodynamics can do without having people work alongside of you for years on end. And I understand there's some hard to grasp concepts behind it, and I'm still figuring it out too. I'm not going to lie, but I cannot argue with these results that I've seen. So being able to experience that firsthand and to work with somebody like Ted who's so committed to it, there was no way I was going to leave that behind. I wanted to take that with me.
You talked earlier about the idea of one of the ideas of biodynamics, and one of the ideas that you were learning is the whole farm, and not just as a vineyard, but vineyard as part of a system. So tell me about how you saw the animals and the farm system making things better for the vineyard and for the wine.
Certainly. I'm going to take a couple different angles at this, right? So one of my hang-ups with our industry is that when you're farming grapes solely for the grapes, you can create an agricultural desert. You can have your vines growing great and healthy, but if that's all that's there, then the natural flora and fauna has no place, right? And so that doesn't make any sense to me. You look to the natural world, and the most resilient systems are the most complex, right? And so the tenets of biodynamics speak to that, right? They want to cultivate biodiversity on all levels. And if you're cultivating biodiversity on all levels, you're creating a more complex system, right? So the sheep right now are in the vineyard grazing, right? And it's not just the sheep being there, right? It's also the sheep are eating different things, right? And they defecate, and that manure in turn helps feed the vines. It also helps fertilize the ground and other plants that are growing around it, right? That breakdown of materials cultivates a diverse biome of bacteria and fungi, right? So it works synergistically. Having the compost here, right? We're making compost in order to spread life about the property and the fertility as well. It's not just the nitrogen in there feeding the plants. It's not that simplistic. It's all the things involved. The compost preps are put into the compost pile to help bring balance and what our farm needs. We then take that compost and we put it in those areas that most need it. It's all about trying to create a more resilient system. All the while, that greater amount of microbiological diversity is going to help create a more complex wine, in my opinion, right? I mean, there's certainly more and more research going into there, like talking about like the importance of the complexity of life on the grapes itself, and I want to make sure that our farm is really rich. So going from just the vineyard, like you want to think about the peripheral areas, right? So you have to have areas for, I feel you want to have areas for the plants and animals that want to be there, right? So we want to have forest. We want to have some underbrush, so we can have birds, insects, reptiles, what have you, have some zones where they can hide out, and so they're not only looking for cover in the vineyard, they have the forest to live in, they've got some bramble and briar to hide from predators, and then we also have predators present as well, because we have life here. Excuse me. We have such a we have so many predatory birds here. It's so cool. And I mean, there's herons, there's kestrels, there's all sorts of hawks and eagles. It's awesome, and that's because we are doing what we can to have as much diversity here as possible, and having areas here, and not just areas here for this diversity, and not just solely grapevines planted property line to property line, I think is important, and is something that I always want to prioritize. And even when we don't have areas, like sometimes there's pre-existing vineyards that I had nothing to do with. Like, all right, let's try to create some habitat for them. All right, we'll plant a few natives here, we'll put an owl box there, we'll put some bird boxes there, maybe bat box there, trying to create habitat for them in zones that there isn't otherwise. So, and viewing the farm holistically as well, right? So you can't just take care of the vineyard and have the whole farm be healthy. You have to take care of it all. We need to be stewards to the forest, right? So that natural oak chaparral that's here, it's in need of a little help from us, because we have decimated the natural migratory paths of all these grazers that would otherwise keep the understory clean. We just recently here cleared out some oak chaparral, and a lot of that stuff that we cleaned out from the underbrush, we chipped up, and now it's in the compost pile, right? And there's fields that we're prepping for future planting, right? We're picking rocks out of, but at the same token, we're also providing habitat for those kestrels to pick off the voles and rodents and stuff like that. And we're trying to look at our planning of future plantings in a way that we can have these zones for natural flora and fauna.
So I'm curious with that, with the biodynamic and that kind of farming philosophy. I'm curious, as you're developing like a winemaking philosophy, how does the winemaking philosophy feed out of that, and how does your role as both working in the vineyard and working in the winery kind of help you create those the philosophies that work together?
So in the wine world now, there's very much a segregation between what's going on in the vineyard and what happens in the winery. I mean, we have so many wineries now that just buy grapes from different vineyards and don't have as deep a connection to it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Please, I understand that almost every winery can't start with a vineyard, right? It's just the barriers to entry are too high. But going back to the ethereal forest thing, I feel like having a connection with the vines and working with the vines and understanding what went into it, and then bringing those grapes into the winery, inherently I'm going to care more about it, right? I have more vested into it. I view the grapes as they're picked, like that's 100% potential right there. That's Mother Nature gave us 100% potential, and we're just trying not to mess it up by the time it gets to the bottle, right? As far as winemaking practices and how it relates to biodynamics, I toy with the moon cycles and trying to time rackings and bottlings due to the moon cycle, much to the chagrin of my assistant winemaker, Chris, who's much more pragmatic than I. But I think it's purposeful, and we have intent behind it. And we are trying to create wines that carry that vitality and vibrancy from the vineyard into the bottle. But I can't speak to specific winemaking practices that I would say are like biodynamic winemaking practices. I view biodynamics very much a farming practice, and then the winemaking side of it, what is just the translation of the farming into the bottle.
All right. So, what brought you to Cristom?
Yes, where we are now. So, what brought me to Cristom? It's a confluence of several different things. So, working at Littorai, I mean, it's a dream job. It's really great. But I knew I could stay at Littorai as long as I wanted to. Ted was happy to have me. We had fostered a great relationship. It was wonderful. But I knew I needed to do something else and go out on my own and try to prove to myself that I'm not, I don't have to hold on to Ted in order to be successful, right? So I started looking outwards, a few years back, and started looking around. What was next, right? And so as I was looking around, I was trying to understand the matrix of what I was trying to fulfill, right? So, all right, so I don't want to work for a large company. That's something that I felt pretty strongly about. I wanted to work for somebody that I could, shake their hand and look them in the eye, right? I wanted to work for a smaller business. I didn't want to make too much wine, right? I want to continue to concentrate on making classic wine. I'm not looking to make super hip right now, flash of the pan, what's cool right now sort of wine. I want to make classic wine. I want to make wine that I want to make wine, and I want to work for a winery that has a lasting reputation, right? And can go the distance. I want to live in an area in which I'm able to be financially sustainable. I love the North Coast. I love the North Bay area very much. There's lots of opportunity there, but unfortunately, it's a really expensive place to live, right? And moreover, it's more and more being ruled by larger companies and larger wineries. The barriers to entry there are just so huge. It's hard for small wineries to make it there. I met a woman that wanted to move north. So several years back, I met my now wife, Hannah, and she was born and raised in Napa, and we met while both she was living in Santa Rosa and I was living in Occidental, and we both wanted a life where we could get ahead, right? And so we started looking to those areas. And so me coming from Oregon and coming from this area, I made a few trips up here and started asking around and started putting the word out, started talking to people. On one Thanksgiving trip a couple years back, I got really inspired by what was happening up here. It was Thanksgiving night, it was after dinner, and I got to meet up with Andrew Rikers, Alban, from Angela Estate, or should I say Abbott Claim, and John Suarez. John Suarez, he's ubiquitous in the Oregon wine industry here. And we were just talking wine. We stayed up late talking about the potential of Chardonnay here in Oregon, and drinking Chablis, and just nerding out hardcore. And it got me so fired up. So I came up here and went around and visited a bunch of places with my best friend Cliff. And at the end of some visits were places where I really was taken, I told the people who hosted us, like, just to let you know, I'm looking outside of Littorai and looking for what might be my next move, right? And so Tom had come down and visited me at Littorai along with Steve Thompson and Randy Ford. Randy's our national sales guy, and Steve Thompson is our CEO, and Tom is the proprietor. And so they came and visited me at Littorai, and I gave them a tour, rolled out the red carpet, and I didn't know it at the time, but Tom was really taken with the visit, and so were Randy and Steve, and I guess I made an impression on them. So when I left that time telling them that, I'm looking outside of Littorai, it got the gears turning for them. And so Tom called me up and said, "Hey, I think we might have a place for you." That was March of 2019, I think it was. Yeah, I was really interested, and Hannah and I came up here, and we visited and talked things over, and spent some time in McMinnville, and pictured our life up here, and it was checking all the boxes. Tom was really on board in taking this place to the next level, right? Certainly the reputation which Dorner has established here with the wines is undeniable, and I have huge shoes to fill in that manner, right? But I saw an opportunity in working with Tom to bring this place to be an integrated farm, and to diversify it, to try to make our own fertility and bring animals here, and really elevate the farming practices and make an investment in the most important part of this puzzle, and that is the land. And that, coupled with the excitement that I had over Chardonnay here, and the fact that prior to 2018, the Chardonnay from Cristom was minimal. There wasn't a lot produced. I saw a huge opportunity. It was time to leave the roost, and came up here. My wife and I got married in 19. We moved up here shortly thereafter, and I started in July 15th, 2019. Started here, and it was, don't ever start a job in winery, vineyard perspective in the middle of July, because it's just like straight into the fire. So it was a steep learning curve, to say the least, but it was great, and I'm really happy with what we're doing here, and I see a lot more to come.
I'm curious from Tom and Steve's perspective in terms of, you talked about Cristom's reputation, strong reputation for wine, strong reputation for Pinot. What was it about? Why did they want to take that next step? Why did they feel they needed to take the next step and get into more diversity and biodynamics and improve the farm when they already had the reputation that was that strong?
So Tom's intent for Cristom is a sustainable one, and I mean that across the board, not only farming, financially, and socially. You know, he wants Cristom to be a family-run business for the long run, right? And I think he had come to realize that conventional farming was not the answer to that. And being able to take a more progressive approach to the farming was ultimately the answer to it. And biodynamics and what I could bring was the path to that. Tom had already started pushing down this avenue. I'm just really taking it and running with it.
So tell me your role here. You're listed as vineyard manager and winemaker here. Obviously, that's a lot. I'm curious about how you frame out your days, your weeks, your months. How do you balance both sides of things, and what do you feel are the most important things you're doing at the moment?
It's fun. I'm not gonna lie. It's really fun. The diversity of my days changes every day. It's exciting. So it fluctuates with the seasons, obviously. There's no getting away from the timing of some things. So during the winter months, largely it's a concentration on pruning and planning for the year to come, thinking about fertility, all that sort of stuff. But also we have bottling and blends for the subsequent bottlings the next year. So day to day, it's just an evaluation of where the focus needs to be. It's also a managerial role too, right? I'm so fortunate to have such a solid vineyard crew. We have a vineyard foreman that has been here for ages, since almost the beginning, who knows the place really well and knows what needs to be done when. So, you know, if I drop the ball on something, it's not like it's going to go into the abyss and we're going to suffer. Like there's other eyes on the prize. So. Him, along with our lieutenants, as I like to call them in the vineyard, do a fantastic job. So it's like checking in with them a few times a week and making sure we're on the right path, really getting involved in the steps for the biodynamics, the making of the preps, the making of the compost piles, the trying to manifest the diversity and how we manage things. I think historically here it's been, all right, well, if we need to do a bunch of pruning, we're going to have a big burn pile, right? Well, changing that culture, encouraging people to look at things in a different way, and slowly moving the needle, and in sometimes, very abruptly moving the needle to a more progressive way of thinking. It's always a challenge. And then when it comes to inside the winery, man, oh man, I cannot say enough good things about Chris Butler, our assistant winemaker. So right after I started in July, I got the notice from the then Cellar Master that he was taken off. So like right before harvest, Cellar Master, the guy that I'm going to lean on to show me how things are working and stuff like that, he takes off. And so I put out the word to friends in the area, anybody who you'd recommend for the job. And Jill Ferris, the Cellar Master over at Lingua Franca, he told me about Chris. And Chris was doing a long-term internship for Kate at Penarash. And I called him up. I'm like, hey, I hear you might be interested in a full-time job. You want to come out and talk? I brought him out here. We went for a drive around the vineyard. I kind of explained to him what I wanted to accomplish and where I wanted to go. And Chris is like, let's do this. And There was a few other candidates for that position. I had interviewed with a couple other people, but Chris and I, our skill sets complement each other. I mean, he's taught classes at UC Davis. He has a master's from UC Davis. He's done vintages all over the world. He's very learned in the hard sciences, and he's very, very pragmatic, and it's great because I am not. He is like I'm much more touchy-feely, like ethereal forces, biodynamics. You know, like that's more my game, and he's more like, well, these finding agents at this rate, I think will produce the best result, and it's awesome. And so he's really been my partner for the wine making side of stuff. We've been able to take blending, making blending decisions earlier, being able to project out farther. It's been a fantastic partnership, and all the while I still have the laurels to rest on of Steve and Tom, because they've been making wine here for ages, right from the beginning, and so there is no understating the contribution which Steve Dorner has made for this business. You can't overstate it. I think I might have said that wrong, but you can't overstate it. He is what manifested Cristom, and Tom, now taking the business over from his father, wants to make it even greater, right? And I feel it's my role to be Tom's partner in doing so. And it's every day is different. We mix it up. I've got such a great team here, from our 16 full-time vineyard crew to our sales crew, which is out there keeping us in the black and keeping wines moving, to our tasting room crew, to Steve, our CEO, being able to have the vision and for planning all these numbers out. And then having Tom as a partner in pushing these things forward. It's really a unique thing, and it's a really exciting place to be right now.
So tell me how, if at all, you anticipate the wines changing here. Obviously, you're talking about adding more Chardonnay. Will the wines be different? Are you expecting them to be different as you look ahead?
Yes and no, right? So obviously the style of, I think it'll be pretty clear in the release of the 2019 Chardonnays that my Chardonnay making style is a bit different than what historically has been here for Cristom. I like wines of tension, nice linear, I like mineral component. I like a lot of acid in Chardonnay. That's really important for me. So Chardonnay, absolutely. Pinot Noir. Steve made wines at Calera with lots of whole cluster. He came here to Cristom, has been making wines with lots of whole cluster, and they're great. They're beautiful. And I want to continue that tradition, right? There's certainly going to be lots of whole cluster in Cristom's future, for sure. And we have Steve to work with. He's still here on a daily basis, and he helps with the winemaking decisions, especially with the Pinot Noir and the blending, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that the Pinot Noir is going to change dramatically. I think it's more going to be, if anything, a clearer interpretation of the vintage, as I'm pushing for more involvement not only in our vineyards but also in our purchase fruit vineyards, which go into much of the blends. So making sure that we get those grapes off the vine at the appropriate time, maybe dialing down the ripeness just a hair or two, but cleaning things up a little bit in the cellar is going to help us. There's been some substantial investment in the infrastructure for winemaking here, and we've got a barrel steamer and we've got a pressure washer for our barrels. So I think the wines might be a little bit cleaner, and but largely the Pinot is going to be stylistically similar. Lots of whole cluster, without a doubt. Certainly going to be on the bold end of the spectrum, as they always have been, but just speak to the vintage a little bit more. I think the 2019 Pinots will be evident of that, 19 being a vintage with a little bit of rain and some certain challenges there, and it was really nice to have Steve and Tom here, coming from California and having my first vintage in Oregon be 19. I would have lost my shit. In California, obviously, we don't see the rains like we saw in 19, and so they were able to talk me off the ledge and make sure I wasn't going to do anything foolhardy. But the wines, I think, are indicative of the vintage. A little bit lower alcohol, a little bit more restrained style, but plenty of fruit and plenty of whole cluster and intensity. So, it's going to just be a slow effort to refine things a little bit.
Earlier you talked about not ever taking a job you were qualified for. I'm curious, coming into a job like this, did you feel ready for this job, and was there added pressure taking over for a winemaker who was so highly thought of?
No, I totally did not feel competent for this job, but yes, I was very comfortable taking this job. Certainly it's intimidating, right? Like, before I took the job, I kept on, blindly asking people, what are wineries in Oregon you really like? And time and time again, Cristom would be definitely mentioned, and Steve's name would come up, right? These are massive shoes to fill, right? And I'm not Steve. I'm never going to be Steve. He is such a warm, friendly person, gregarious, and try as I might, it just doesn't come as naturally to me as it does to him. It's certainly intimidating, but I'm up for the challenge. I want to continue to make wines that he's proud of, and I want to do his legacy true, right? And I think ultimately we have the same goals of making classic wines that last a long time, that are, speaking of time and place.
So obviously you have a lot of things you're getting started on here. Tell me, as you look ahead for Cristom 5-10 years down the road, what do you anticipate happening? What will be different? What will it look like? And what are you kind of hoping for as you look ahead?
Well, I mean, we can. If you two want to walk around afterwards, we can take a look at what immediate things have changed here. And we've got like upwards. We have 3 large windrows of compost out there, right? And up until a few years ago, there was no compost made here. We've got our flock of 21 sheep running the vineyard right now, and they're going to grow, right? I'm hoping to get cows here. I want to diversify this farm. I want to. I realize the opportunity we have at Cristom to become a role model of progressive farming here, right? So we have a reputation of wine already, and I want to make that reputation synonymous with progressive farming. And that's no small feat, right? We've got 240 acres here. It's a lot to manage. It's a lot of these weird projects take time, and slowly but surely we're taking bites out of it, right? I want to see this farm grow in vitality. I want to see the vines continue to age gracefully and continue to be strong. And that's a continual effort, right? Like, wood disease takes no rest. Viruses take no rest. We've got some new plantings coming up in Paul, which we'll be planting out a little bit more as time progresses. But becoming more estate focused, right? Obviously, we have the ladies and Paul, our vineyard designates off the ranch here, but as we plant out more and more of Paul, more and more of Mount Jefferson Cuvée, which is now an Eola Amity wine, will be sourced directly off of here. And so by growing the grapes ourselves, elevating the quality of that wine, and elevating the quality of the ladies as well. So there's so much opportunity here for farming growth, for progression. It's going to be, it's going to change annually. And I think as visitors come here, I want to make this a destination, not just for the wine, but like, oh, have you been to Cristom? Like, they're doing some cool stuff. Like, you can walk around, check out all these animals. You should really see their compost piles. It's really inspiring, and I want this farm to be as impressive as it can be, and there's a lot more we can do.
You talked about viruses, so I guess it's as good a time as any to talk about COVID-19. Obviously, we're talking to you in November of 2020, and we're kind of winding down harvest under COVID. I'm curious how the pandemic has sort of altered work life for you, life here at Cristom, and how harvest went with the new restrictions in place.
Yeah, can't forget the Rona. Rona is everywhere. It's everything that we do has to do with Rona, right? It's affected every walk of life. And so here we were pretty verdant about trying to maintain social distancing, obviously wearing masks all the time, and a lot of things were implemented in order to maintain the safety of all of our employees, not only in the winery and the tasting room, but also in the vineyard as well, right? And it's also been a little bit of a shift in culture as well, right? So the farming and winemaking world has a bit of machismo behind it, right? Oh, I'm not sick. I can work through this. It's no problem. That's totally different now, right? Like, I encourage people to stay at home if they got a scratchy throat, if they feel like their equilibrium's off a little bit or their chakra's not totally centered. Like, just take the day off. We'll get through without you. And the same thing goes for me. It's we are just hyper vigilant about trying to maintain the health and well-being of what makes all of this possible. So, and that's not even going to start on what challenges this has presented us with sales, right? And Cristom's been very fortunate in the fact that we are an established brand. People know who we are. For lack of a better term, I think of us as kind of a blue chip Oregon winery. So people are aware of us, and that works to our favor. But that doesn't mean like it's come easily for us to continue to propagate sales. And for that, I tip my hat to our DTC manager, Rachel Sims, Garen Poole. Both of them are doing fantastic things with our wine club, and working tirelessly with our internet sales, and trying to make sure that we do have a place to come in to work. The lights come on, and all of that works. Randy Ford even has a bigger challenge because he's got not only nationally but also internationally selling wine, and Cristom's huge in restaurants. We top 100 wine year in, year out, and a lot of that's because of our restaurant presence. And there's had to be paradigm shifts, right, in figuring out how we're going to manage all of this. And I'm so grateful for every one of them to keep working hard at all of this, because it allows me to focus on, the farming, the sheep, the wine, and everything that we have going on here.
So tell me about your sort of initial impressions of the Oregon wine industry. Obviously, growing up here or leaving, coming back. I'm curious about what your kind of initial impressions have been of the industry as you became aware of it, and what it looks like now to you as you're a part of it.
Oregon wine industry is great. It's certainly different than the California wine industry, as I've alluded to earlier. It's got fewer barriers to entry, so there's a lot. I think. Oregon is kind of like where California was in the 80s, more or less. Like there's just a lot of opportunity here. And I also see a lot of those people who founded the Oregon wine industry. A lot of them are now aging out, and you're seeing an influx of a lot of young winemaking talent, and that's super exciting. I'm so fortunate to have all these people that I can call up. I mean, Tomas around the corner, right? Alvan, Andrew, Seth Morgan Long. I mean, these are people that are all available and open for anything that I could ask for. It's exciting. It's a very open community. I feel as if in California things were a little bit more guarded. People were like, "Oh no, I'm not going to show you how we make the Kool-Aid. Like that's our secret recipe." But I think Oregon's much less guarded, and I find that heartening. It's so nice to be up here and working with vines that are also dry farmed. A lot of the vineyards that we were working with in California, there just would not be the consistency if there wasn't irrigation. And so being able to plant a vineyard without having to put irrigation in, like that's not possible in Oregon, right? In California, excuse me. Oregon is great. It's so much fun to farm. It's very progressive. It's open to new ideas. We've got some great viticultural areas. I'm enamored with the Eola Amity Hills. It's really stolen my heart. Obviously the Pinot Noir has great structure and earthiness and complexity, but also fruit. But the Chardonnay is really, really exciting. We've got some great farmers that we work with. The Von Osen Vineyard, which is just down the road here on Bethel Heights, and then the Eola Springs Vineyard make up the heart of our Eola Amity Chardonnay blend. Two rock solid vineyards that produce some wonderful grapes, which allow us to produce a beautiful Chardonnay at what I think is a very reasonable price. It's these things would not be possible in an AVA like the Sonoma coast. I think there's so much value here, so much opportunity. It's much more of a accessible venue to so many people than I think some of the exalted zones of California, but I don't think is an inferior wine region in any respect.
What about as you look ahead for Oregon? What do you see the industry looking like over the next 5 or 10 years?
Pull out the crystal ball, take a look. Obviously, Oregon's wines are going to become more renowned, right? Just the marketing machine and more winemakers and farms growing better grapes, elevating the whole scene is going to take note. People are going to take note, and it's as I was saying, it's more accessible too. I think globally speaking, Oregon's been off the radar because California's got such a big voice, but Oregon's going to be picking up steam as as these wines get out there, because they're just so exciting. Additionally, as we see the effects of global warming, it's going to affect the grapes as well. I think Oregon's going to see a sweet spot, I think, in this. I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist, and I can't tell you how fast things are going to warm up, but I think there's going to be a period where we're going to have some really consistent vintages. We already have seen it, and it's going to be become more prevalent. There's just going to be more consistent vintages here, whereas previously it had been very hit and miss. And so as things get hotter and hotter down in Cali, I think, things will get a little bit warmer here, but we're going to get a sweet spot where we get some really consistent vintages. I think Oregon is also going to make more strides in its farming. It's becoming more and more important to the consumer, and I think the Oregon vineyard manager is becoming more and more inclined to explore organic practices, and with less rain, it makes it a little bit easier too. So every year, I feel as if I see a new mildicide or fungicide come out that wasn't there before, that's organic, and it's great. We're getting more and more tools in the toolbox, and it's going to help make it a little bit easier to farm in that manner. So I think the best days are still to come for the Oregon wine industry. I really hope there's still a place for the small to medium-sized wineries. I know that there are large businesses up here buying up more and more land, and they're entitled to, and they certainly bring things to the table that small and medium-sized wineries can't. But I hope Oregon doesn't get too big, right? I really want it to see the mistakes that were made in Sonoma and Napa, and I would like to see development here be a little bit more responsible, and not not proliferate as intensely as it did in Napa and Sonoma. I think the conservation of our open spaces is very important, and while many hillsides are very appetizing, I think there needs to be some responsibility in preserving those. It's important. It's important for us in the future, and
What about as you look ahead for yourself? Obviously, you said you settled in McMinnville. We got your wife up here. What do you see for yourself as you look ahead in the future? How are you settling in so far?
I haven't told you the most exciting bit. I mean, obviously, Hannah, my wife, she's great, wonderful. We've got a house and stuff in McMinnville, but my daughter was born in July. So thank you very much. She's very much a focal point in my life, and when I have a stressful day at work and I'm having a hard time of letting things go, I try to let things go in the car, but when I get home and I see Hannah and Nora, it's just everything melts away, and I'm right there with them. For myself, I want to invest more in my family, of course, but also invest more in Cristom and into the wine industry. Largely, I went from Littorai, where I was kind of in a bubble on the West Sonoma coast there, and then I've come to here at Cristom, and in my fervor to figure things out and to understand how to do things here and how to get things to work, I've kind of insulated myself and created a little bit of a bubble, but I want to start to make a greater contribution to the greater community here. It's certainly a bit more challenging with Rona, as we said, but it's not going to last forever. And I can make contributions in other ways as well. Investing in my community and all the while sharing that with my place of work and my family.
All right. One last question for you. I get a little philosophical for you to finish this off. What is wine's role in society?
What is wine's role in society? Here's a good one to get roasted on for sure. Wine is frivolous. It's not necessary for life. I mean, a lot of people think it is, but it isn't, right? Life, or should I say, wine for me is a platform to educate people about how they consume. And I think wine, this privileged place that we are in being able to have a livelihood making wine and growing grapes and selling it to people who have the means to purchase it. I think we also need to take that as a responsibility for educating them on what they're consuming. People buy carrots off the shelf without much thought of what goes into it. Yes, they might buy organic because they think it's the right thing, but people are interested in wine and want to understand why and where. And I view wine as a great way to educate people. So that's why I want this place to become a beacon. And I want it to help proliferate these ideas and to educate people about what they're consuming. Not just what wine they're consuming and what goes into that wine, but also, agriculture in general. We vote more than just with our ballots. We vote with our dollars. And I feel wine for me is that educational platform. For society as a whole, it's a lens of looking at the world, looking at different societies. It's also an artistic expression, certainly. It's a way to connect with the earth. It's a way to connect with the ethereal world in which we cannot grasp. There are so many wines that I've had in my life that I cannot explain the deep effects it's had on me. It is proof to me that there are deeper things at play in the natural world.
It's a pretty fantastic answer, I gotta say. It's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here today that we should have covered?
I feel as if I've just been rambling and I feel so self-absorbed right now. I want to ask you about yourself. How was your day? What's going on? This is a strange seat to be sitting in, but I'm humbled and really grateful for the opportunity to share my story. And
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your thoughts, your stories here, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.